Yeah, Shaniyat Chowdhury, welcome to the podcast. For those who don't know, you're a candidate that's running for New York's 5th District. Could you tell us a little bit about who you are and why you're running?
Yeah, for sure. My name is Shaniyat Chowdhury. I go by Sean for short, and I'm a product of public housing, public education, and I believe that in a district like New York 5, which is a working class district, I want to champion for working class representation. New York 5 is the southernmost part of Queens, and encompasses the greater parts of Jamaica, the Rockaways, and parts of Nassau County, including Elmont and Valley Stream. It's a minority majority district, 50% Black, 50% other people of color, including Latinos, South Asians. Uh, you know, we've been the epicenter for the coronavirus pandemic. So we have a lot of essential workers. We have a lot of small business owners and homeowners. Essentially, that's where I'm at. I come from a working class Bangladeshi immigrant family. So, my father waited tables, my mother cleaned hotel rooms for a living. And after we lost our home to foreclosure in 2007, I enlisted in the United States Marine Corps out of just the need for housing, healthcare, and education. But then I realized that, we needed more opportunities than this for poor children, not having to have access, to all these things that should be common for the everyday person. It shouldn't come at the cost of unjust wars. We spent over $6 trillion over the last 20 years in the Middle East, and, we've gotten nothing out of these wars. That's essentially why I believe that, fighting for Medicare for all, Green New Deal, free public college tuition is more important now than ever. So,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah, and you've talked about how the financial crash of 2007 affected your family and upbringing a lot. The economy's now, again, been ravaged. We're kind of in another depression. The American dream seems more of a dream than a reality at this point, right?
Yeah.
As a congressperson, how do you plan to help mitigate the economic despair that's been brought on by the coronavirus pandemic and the depression we're living through right now? And what effects have you seen of our government's inaction in your own community?
Yeah, I'll try to answer it backwards. I think that first of all, Congress has left working people out of these deals. They pretty much failed all of us. The big banks, corporations have been bailed out again during this pandemic. Groups like Amazon, Jeff Bezos have made $535 billion, and while working families lost everything, our homes, our income, the list goes on. So I would continue to have bargained, to make sure that the working families were bailed out and not these corporations. And this is why we need the federal jobs guarantee. I think that's one of the first things that I want to implement and push for the federal jobs guarantee, is to bring back the jobs, because 42% of the jobs that we lost during this pandemic are not going to be coming back. So I think that no Christian should have to be unemployed. I believe that we need to work on strengthening unions, and also having an incentive for having companies, taxing executives, make sure that they keep jobs in America. So there's so many things we could do, but now it's just about Congress taking the courageous step to making that happen.
Yeah, you've said of your incumbent opponent, Gregory Meeks, that he voted to bail out and deregulate Wall Street rather than lift up his constituents, that he sort of upheld the system and to silence the working class and working poor families in the district. Could you talk about how your plan for economic recovery differs from the path taken like Meeks, who sort of represents the kind of Democratic policy of the last 20 years?
Yeah, so, Gregory Meeks has bailed out. He's part of the Democratic establishment that bailed out Wall Street in the financial crisis more than 10 years ago, and we're seeing that again with the coronavirus pandemic. He takes more than $2 million per cycle from Wall Street, and a lot of this money does come from groups like Blackstone and KKR. These are private equity firms, and we have a housing crisis in New York 5. We have a lot of homeowners, so we've lost 320 homes last year. Some of the highest rates of home foreclosures in the state of New York. So with that, I believe that we need to have a federal homes guarantee, essentially building 12 million public housing units, transitioning from fossil fuels industries to renewable energy, and as well as, paying reparations to these communities so we can improve the quality of life. When we have the Democratic establishment having such a stronghold on working class communities, it's not just about what they're trying to represent. I think that in a time like this, it's not much of a difference between Republicans and Democrats, but we have to look at the overall system in itself. So I'm not just challenging the incumbent, but it's, the system that he's enabling, and a system that includes where he's getting his money from. So, it's just not on a national level, but also not on a hyper-local level, because on a local level, he's the chair of the Queens Democratic Party, and he's operating it with 3 real estate attorneys that are not even from the district. And what they do is they take working class families to court who are in debt because they can't afford to pay their mortgages off. So they'll foreclose on their homes or small businesses. And the same private equity firms that are funding my opponent's campaign are also funneling money to these real estate attorneys. And then they come in and they pretty much change the makeup of the community. So it's all a cycle of debt that we're facing here.
You were a staffer for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez during her run for Congress in 2018, and you're running as a Democrat in your race now. Clearly, you think that the model of electing progressives into the Democratic Party is an effective method of affecting change. How do you plan on saving the system from within, and what's kind of your strategy as a member of the kind of progressive faction of the party?
Yeah, I don't necessarily believe we could change the system from within. I think we need to burn it down to the ground and create a new government with working class representation. It's just not about me. It's not about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Obviously, they've done a phenomenal job with the squad, but there are only 4 members of 435 members of the House of Representatives. So it's exactly why we need more people to run for office. It doesn't end here. It doesn't end with 2020. And I think that going forward, 2022, 2024, we as working people could overthrow this fascist government that we're seeing. But both Democrats and Republicans have been complicit in these injustices.
Well, speaking of fascist government, you've described your district. It's quite diverse and working class, and typically we've seen in this country that breeds over-policing. Could you talk about the problem of police militarization and how it presents itself in your community, and what plans you would have to tackle this at a national level? For example, would you endorse the 4-part resolution proposed by Ayanna Pressley and Ilhan Omar? Do you propose a more radical solution? How do you think about responding to the problem with policing that we're having in this country?
Yeah, I mean, policing in this country we've seen has never worked. It's a system built on slavery patrol. And we've seen for so long, so many innocent lives have been lost at the hands of police brutality. And there hasn't been accountability. Even though 5 years ago, the Congress decided to implement body cams and have racial bias training. Obviously, that hasn't worked because the system is still intact. So we need to demilitarize the police. I believe that we need to abolish qualified immunity and end the Racial Profiling Act. So, I do believe that Ayanna Pressley's bill it's a great step forward, but we could be more radical. I don't think we should be afraid to be more radical. That's just one way of addressing the nature of police brutality, but also through the means of reparations. America has been, it's one of the richest countries in the world, but we have yet to pay for our sins for what we've done to slavery. So we need to pay reparations. We need to address the systemic racial income inequality in this country. I'm proud to stand with my allies in this fight. So we have a lot of steps to do, but I think that right now there are some members of Congress like Ayanna Pressley, Ilhan Omar, who are taking that fight forward. So I'm looking forward to getting the fight with them.
Just yesterday, speaking of more radical measures to be taken, just yesterday, the Minneapolis City Council, with a veto-proof majority, voted to defund the police in their city. Could you talk about that? Is that one of the more radical approaches that you would be in support of?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I want to see in New York City. The NYPD, an institution like the NYPD, there's almost $6 billion that's spent on, probably even more because of the wages and the overtime pay that they receive. But when you take into account the amount of money we spend on housing and education, it still doesn't add up to what is being appropriated to the NYPD. So we should defund the police and really allocate these resources back into our communities that will really, really improve the quality of life. And when you improve the quality of life, there'll be less of a need for policing in our communities. So I think that could definitely play a huge factor.
Yeah. You mentioned that you served in the U.S. military for 6 years. Could you talk about how it feels as a veteran to see the commander-in-chief and president threaten to deploy, the U.S. military on civilian protesters who are, exercising their most fundamental American right to speak out against injustices on our own American soil?
Yeah, I think that this is not I don't believe that's what a lot of people have signed up for, and I think the military-industrial complex as a whole is pretty problematic. But at the same time, the government should not be sending out our own military service members on the streets and, essentially giving them full reign to do whatever they want. And that kind of enables the police institutions as well, because they're just following the lead of the military. So, in past histories, when you have capitalists complaining about, other communist nations being a fascist regime, fascist country for committing these atrocities, we're essentially doing the same thing. So we need to really look at ourselves in the mirror and really, see that what we're doing right now is not any benefit for the people at all.
You mentioned the military-industrial complex, and your platform includes a lot of exciting ideas and progressive priorities, such as ending the forever wars and instituting Medicare for all type single-payer healthcare system. If you're elected to Congress, however, many of your colleagues would be funded by the very industries which those programs would affect negatively in a financial sense, including the healthcare industry and the defense contractors, which line the pockets of both parties. How do you plan to influence the legislative body in a more progressive direction and get more Democrats specifically to embrace these very needed policies despite the will of their donors?
Yeah, the money is always going to play an influence until we take the big money out of politics. But until we do that, we need the people, to keep on fighting. Even if Bernie Sanders, we've seen him in the last 4 years, this movement has grown. Now it's about really continuing this fight and really expanding it to other communities and parts of the country where, the potential is there to really have the movement going. And this campaign is a really good example of it. For so long, this district has been pretty much obsolete with a movement because it's been such a stronghold with the party establishment. But when you have your everyday people who really believe in inspiring change and want to be a part of that with other like-minded people, they could really make some noise. So it's now going forward. Bernie Sanders said this is not me, us movement. So we are part of that us movement, and just really about connecting the dots with other organizers and activists who are already doing the work, who've been doing the work, and finding those diamonds in the rough, people who have these lived experiences of being marginalized and putting them at the power to really be the vocal microphone for the communities.
Have you been following a similar campaigning strategy that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez embraced by, knocking every door, boots on the ground, going across, canvassing your community to the fullest extent possible? Or has the coronavirus pandemic kind of gotten in the way of those kind of strategies you would have embraced?
Yeah, I mean, slightly similar. We started this campaign out a little over a year ago. So we did focus a lot on door knocking, and we didn't really focus on connecting with the local Democratic clubs. We already know they were in the pockets of the establishment, so we were just knocking on doors of your everyday person. We were going to grocery stores and just seeing who would be interested, because we have a district that has 2% voter turnout in the congressional primaries. So we know that the potential is there. All we need to do was put out a messaging point that would really excite people, and that's what we've been able to do. But with this coronavirus pandemic, I think that as organizers first, we quickly realized how severe this situation was, and we were able to quickly transition to a digital outreach program. So we were able to connect to thousands of voters right now, and I think people are really excited about this time.
Obviously, anytime that a progressive candidate runs, there's going to be comparisons to Congresswoman AOC. She's probably the standard for how success can go in a progressive insurgency. However, I think one of the criticisms of her from the left that has come over time as she's spent time on the Hill is that she's grown more reluctant to criticize members of her own party. When she first came to Congress, she was a real firebrand. She was sitting outside of Nancy Pelosi's office. Now she kind of refers to her as her mama bear, has been publicly much more soft with her. Is that the approach you would take, or would you, call out Nancy Pelosi when she does something ridiculous like propose a salt cap reduction during a pandemic?
Yeah, I want to make it clear that AOC is her own person. She's a good friend, and she's done a lot for this movement. When Bernie Sanders needed the most in his lowest point of the campaign, she really stepped up and supported him. So it's not easy. I think that, and it's hard to blame us working people. We've been so fed up with the status quo, and we're always going to be angry, so we want to fight. And that's understandable. But at the same time, I think Alexandria is doing the best that she can to really navigate the system. But as I mentioned before, it's difficult when you have 4 members of the squad and part of a larger systemic institution that is going to eat people up, and I think that goes with any kind of large institution that is built on oppressing people, and right now the member of Congress is about oppressing your everyday people because of the amount of money that's being influenced. So I'll be my own person. I've been my own person. I don't want to be AOC. I want to be the first Shaniyat Chowdhury. And I think that I have my own values, and I share similar values with Alexandria. But at the same time, I'm not afraid, to call out, for a spade for what it is. And I think that when we do see something wrong, that we shouldn't be afraid to speak up. But I think there's ways of going about it. And I think that we could hold Nancy Pelosi to a higher standard. But I don't think Nancy Pelosi probably will be the speaker. I think Shahid Buttar has a good shot out there. And so we probably wouldn't have to worry about that.
Fingers crossed, man.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Just to follow up to that, you've said that you really kind of understand the pain and frustration and the desire to burn the system to the ground, right? It's not working for so many people, and it really, for so many people, the American system never has, right? The American dream never was for so many. So what do you say to people who just have no faith in the system, have grown so apathetic that, they're of the 40% of Americans who will stay the 2020 election cycle, perhaps more because of absentee voting? What would you say to them to, give it one more shot, and why your campaign is so different?
Yeah, I don't think that we should ever shame voters for feeling the way they have. There's a reason why we're a lot of working people are in their situations because of the system failing us. So there's always going to be that resentment. I think that's totally understandable. But electoral politics is not the end all. I believe in the power of organizing. So I believe that if you want to make your voice heard, if you really want to take it to the system, organize in your local, maybe DSA chapter, organize with other grassroots activists who are doing the work, who are protesting, who are organizing around these issues, trying to make policy changes from within the community. And I think that with time, I believe people will change their minds when they see that they can make a difference through an organizing field, and really maybe see that the power to vote can also really be the final touch to it.
Shaniyat Chowdhury, is there anywhere people can go to support you, donate, find out more about your campaign?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are about probably 15 days away until Election Day on June 23rd. So all the donations we could get would be helpful. We only take small dollar donations. So you can visit our website at SHAN2020.com. We have a contribution link right there. And you could also follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Shaniyat2020.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it, guys.
Check out the links in the description to follow us on Twitter and at the Vanguard.blog for more content, articles, and such.
Yeah, stay safe, stay cool.